Peter, like it or not, you've in many ways become like the leader R.E.M. have become the leaders of a new wave of American rock bands in a lot of respects. I mean, is that a problem for you now that people's attention is back focused on you as to be the archetypal band?
We never set out to lead anything.
Mm.
We can barely lead ourselves, let alone a group of musicians who are equally as contrary-minded. It just so happens that a lot of American bands were growing up and maturing at the same time, and we just happened to come over here a little bit earlier than maybe the Long Riders or Green on Red or Let's Active or any of those bands. If you ask any of those groups, they'll still say that we're not the leaders, and I completely agree. You know, we're maybe a little bit more successful in the States than the rest of our peer group, but that's the only thing that is different between us.
People tend to point you out, though, as like the archetypal group. I mean, do you then have to live up to expectations in that respect? Do you do things which are now expected of you?
No, I have no expectations of myself. I don't see why anyone else should either. You know, we just get up in the morning and write songs and play them, and that's basically what our job is. We don't really worry too much about, you know, the press or what our place in society is supposed to be, or leading a movement to bands. You know, it's sometimes people's expectations are fairly high, but you know, that's their fault, not mine.
There's a lot of flack levelled at you from the press for being a revivalist group, or the whole thing being a revivalist thing. Is that the case?
I don't think it's in our case. I mean, there are a lot of bands that you see that are, you know, 1960s revivalists. I mean, to me, the 1960s was, you know, roller skating and bubblegum. I was 10 when it ended. It's 11 or something. You know, I have no great need to bring back that decade. I didn't care for the kind of music that came from that, except for maybe 2 bands, 3 bands. You know, I like the Kinks a lot, and I like the Stones, and that's just about it. You know, my decade is the 70s. That's when I grew up, and so I like T-Rex and Slade, and I saw all those bands when I was 14. I thought it was really groovy, and I mean, that's kind of the decade that I draw upon. The New York Dolls, they were my favorite band of all time, I think.
Does that come through in your music then, do you think? I mean, you've had to search around for a folklore. America doesn't really have its own history, and culture plays an important part in music. You've had to search for something and choose.
Well, America's always had good music. I mean, whether it be Robert Johnson or Hank Williams or you know, Cole Porter. But I think any band making the music that they make is a process of just winnowing through their influences and picking things they like. For us, it happened to be like the Velvet Underground, New York Dolls, you know, those kind of things. For other people, it was the Beatles and the Standells and that kind of stuff.
Do you like the other bands, the likes of the Long Riders and Lone Justice? I mean, do you feel an affinity with them?
Most of the bands I've heard I like the Long Riders, and I like Green on Red a lot. I've never really heard Lone Justice. I think I met them once, you know, at a bar somewhere, but we're on the road so much, it's really hard to keep up with bands. I only get to really know what a band is about when I see them, and Lone Justice has never been any place I've been.
Do people expect you to know them incredibly well?
Oh, no. You know, I don't think so. I don't think people really expect me to know anything. You know, musicians are supposed to be stupid, so that's my excuse.
What part of Music Box's American equivalent, MTV, played in sort of the success of R.E.M? Did they? I mean, I wouldn't imagine R.E.M to be the typical band you'd see on MTV. Is there an interest?
They play our videos about, you know, every 3rd Tuesday of the month at 3 a.m. It's not been a huge tool to our success by any means, and that's because we kind of approach videos unlike, you know, most bands. They're just kind of fun little things for us. We don't do them for commercial purposes, and they're not very commercial.
Are you video conscious?
Well, we do them. I mean, you know, I wouldn't do them if they didn't help, you know, sell records and that kind of stuff. It's not something that I do for fun. A lot of people I know really like videos and spend their time playing with them, you know, outside of the band. But to me, it's just another, you know, pain in the whatever that I have to deal with. And we try to do it, you know, to the best of our ability and, you know, with integrity and all that. We wouldn't say show, you know, women in bondage or you know, heavy metal guitar type antics to sell records on our videos. But you know, we do videos. I mean, I feel kind of ambivalent about it, but well.
It's kind of hard to define R.E.M's appeal. Where would you put R.E.M's appeal?
God, I don't know. Our audiences seem to run the gamut. There's no one particular person. In America, they always, all the critics say that our audience is a real yuppie audience, whatever that is. I guess upwardly mobile professionals. None of my friends are professionals at anything. Well, downwardly mobile. So that's the kind of people that I think are, you know, come to see us, but you never know.
Do you play to your own ilk then? Or would you like to?
Actually, we just play to each other, the 4 of us. We never worry too much about who's in the audience one way or the other, unless it's, you know, in a dangerous situation. If we're playing, say, a Marine Air Force base or something like that, which we've done, then you kind of tend to watch the audience, you know, basically to see if things get thrown at you from out front. But we never really worry too much about playing to the wants or needs or desires of some kind of mythical, typical audience.
Doesn't that make it a little introspective, a little cliquey?
Maybe, but I think that ultimately any musician that's worth anything works for his own benefit and not for uh, an audience, because the audience doesn't really, they seem to want something, but they don't know what it is, and a lot of times. And you if you give them what they want, it's usually the greatest hits, and you don't ever change what you do, and that's kind of boring. I think that the best musicians and artists, whatever, that I like, are the ones that know what they're doing and give the audience what they need to hear rather than what they want to hear.
You're delightfully lucid in your answers and your interviews. You give a lot away, but that's not the case for like Michael's lyrics. I mean, there's a certain mysticism with R.E.M.
Well, I wouldn't confuse mysticism with being kind of personal and oblique. None of us are mystics. None of us are religious. Believe in God or any of that stuff, which is, I guess, the job of mystic. He writes really personally, and it's sometimes written in code, and he doesn't want, ex-girlfriends' names and stuff in the lyrics, and I don't blame him. We all know who and what the songs are about, and I think that the audience will get the right idea, the right emotions, and the right perspective on the song from listening. They might not know, names, dates, and places, but they are songs, not diaries.
I read something recently that said that you're supposed to be a Southern band. Can that be a problem that, again, you live up to people's expectations?
I don't know. See, everyone thinks that the South is like the Dukes of Hazzard County, driving around drunk and smashing up cars. And not to say that doesn't go on, but that's not the South. Being a Southern band is just, that's where we live. That's where I pick up my mail. But I mean, I grew up with music from all over the world, from Africa, from England, from New York. They were all equally as far away and equally as weird to me when I was growing up. So we kind of consider ourselves to be like an international band. I mean, we don't sound like Leonard Skinner. We don't sound like Hank Williams. That's Southern rock to me.
You've set yourself aside from rock and roll in some respects, and the publishing deal that you've got. If you'd like to explain that you're with BMI as opposed to ASCAP. If you could explain that to us.
Oh well, that's just there's two publishing companies basically, and I mean it's just a matter of taste. But ASCAP was always the Tin Pan Alley songwriters. They were the ones who tried to prevent race music, they called it then. It was blues and stuff like that, and hillbilly music, which was country and western, from being on the airwaves. So they wouldn't license their songs. BMI was made by people for basically the outsiders, and this was in the late 40s, early 50s, I guess. Maybe even the middle 40s. And so they did the Hank Williams stuff, and they did all the blues records and all those things, and allowed those things to reach the air. It's nowadays the lines are so finely drawn, it doesn't really matter. They're all just huge conglomerates. But just the initial idea of BMI was to be for the outsiders, hillbilly music and black music, and so that's kind of the ones we picked. Just
Does that make you cynical? Problems like that?
Well, yeah, sure. I'm cynical anyway. I mean, I think the whole business stinks anyway. It's all pretty silly. But then again, I'm an adult in a rock and roll band, and that's about as silly as you can get. So I mean, I view myself with as much cynicism as anyone else. Yeah.